to then possibly reducing the requirements, okay, that are in the AIMS. Meaning, for example, going, like you said, from marine site to now this arid site that the first gentleman presented on earlier. You still have the salts and the stuff that are still on the canister unless you're cleaning them off, okay? So as you're moving it in, you're changing the local environment, but the environment from the previous site is still there. So how do we mesh that out? The way we mesh that out is OP-E. And OP-E will help us with getting to that, to the basis, and then giving us the comfort to say, yeah, we can relax. Maybe you don't need to inspect every 5 years. Maybe you can inspect every 10 years now that you're in an arid environment. These are the types of things that will be useful when you baseline and get that information.
I have another question. I'm curious about the cast transfer, cast handling equipment that you're going to be using and what's required. I sort of didn't understand well whether you're going for a universal type cast transfer, cast handling equipment, or is it that you're going to use for each system, you're going to have the applicable already ITS cast handling equipment in the facility? How's that work? Your answer for new ones first.
Go ahead. Your answer for yours first.
Well, why don't we get,
more complicated.
So I want to get back to the pictures. I mean, they might be helpful, the visuals for if you want to start with that, maybe page 12.
Okay,
Something help a little bit.
the NAC transfer facility requires a stack up. And at each of the sites where we do cask loading, we put the fuel canister into the transfer cask, we weld it up, and then we take the transfer cask and stack it on top of the VCC concrete cask. And we're able to lower, and we do a lot of site-specific evaluation, seismic requirements. We qualify that stacked up, or in some cases it's tied down to the building. Sometimes it's transferred into other areas outside the fuel handling building. So that's already done right now for a vertical transfer. The piece is, in each of our tech specs for the UMS, MPC, and MAG, we have a section drafted up that indicates that we will design a canister, I believe it's called a canister handling facility within our tech specs. And that's where this piece of equipment is going to fall into. It says, I'm never going to take the cask out of this or put it into another piece. I can design and analyze this handling facility in accordance with site requirements. And I would use the necessary codes and regulations to develop this handling system. And at that point, we would back up what we did at the site, which is to remove a canister from the concrete cask. We would stack a transfer cask on top of it. Same thing for a transport cask. You put the same system on top to a stack up, and you can move the canister from a transport cask to a storage cask.
Right, but then what you're saying is that your license would be asking to basically be licensed to design something to handle your...
The license will require the canister handling facility to be analyzed and approved by the NRC prior to implementation.
Right.
Transfer casks already exist. Mm-hmm. Transport casks are already licensed. Concrete cask, storage casks are already licensed. All the other components are already licensed. They already cover the transfer and the operations required to do so. All we have to do is implement this one piece of equipment at the specific site, which is WCS's facility, to perform this operation.
And last question, what would a receipt campaign look like? I mean, do you envision getting several canisters at the same time, different systems? I mean, what would that look like?
Logistically, I don't know how much we want to talk about what you expect DOE to do.
Well, we can talk. The consist would be 3 to 5 casts. So you expect. I mean, I think we'd be smart about it. We'd probably get one shipment from a site per week. I assume maybe the similar canisters and that for a shipment, just logistically, and then the inspection would be the normal DOT inspections for contamination, and then as we talked about, and I know this debate, you could physically inspect the canister, during the transfer operations, and we propose only doing that if there's an anomaly. I know that Alan and Mark have strongly suggested we're doing every one, but as we see it,
You've got mail.
Part of the transfer operation, we have technology to be able to perform the inspections at that time when you're moving from the transfer cask into the HSMs for the new systems, or when you're doing the movement from the transport to transfer cask for the NAC. At that time, if inspections occur, to be part of the transfer operations.
Just again, how long might this take, and how long are the things going to be sitting out in the transportation packages for a week, 2 weeks, a month?
I'm probably going beyond this, but in terms of our pull-to-pad loading experience, I think it'd be much simpler. I think you could do multiple canisters within a week in fuel loading, and if you look at the actual on-site experience, taking a cask from a reactor building to the pad is about a shift, let's say. And so let's say you add additional inspections and operations. I could see being able to handle a 3 to 5 canister consist in a week. Again, I'm just extrapolating, but I don't think those operations, because you're not loading fuel, would be that time consuming.
Will your facility include a place, a building to house the packages until you transfer them, or are you going to take them off the rails basically and store them?
Our intention is that, our current thinking is that the cars would be dropped, and then we would bring one rail car in at a time into the transfer building, and then you would do the transfer, and then you would go out and get the next one and bring it in. And there'll be wash-down stations and all the RP things that have to be done on the siding, and then they would be brought indoors when it was time to transfer them into this transfer facility.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions in summer. For your next system, it's total storage. So the distance, I want to know the distance between 2 tasks at CISF will be the same as we approved before. And is that right?
That's correct. We don't intend, as we noted in our slides, to make any changes to the as-licensed storage configurations.
Okay. And the second question, when you embedded the thermal impact from one system to another system, what kind of decay heat you are going to use? You are use the maximum decay heat, or you will use the current heat load? Which one you are going to use in your thermal evaluation?
For the thermal evaluation, for the on-pad thermal. I would say that it would be defendable to use the transported licensed heat load for the thermal.
Okay, then that's not, okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say one more thing, Al sounded see. I know we talked about baselining, and we're talking, but, the sampling is also out there. You don't necessarily have to, I don't think, inspect every single canister possibly, but you may want to go after a subset of them. But this is something that I just want to say.
As good as Mark said.
I mean, baselining is a great idea, okay? But, I think that sampling, like we're doing with amps, okay, and sampling that way, is also a viable approach if you want to come in with that. But I think it's something to see how the environment, how things are going, okay, is important.
Sure, no, we're here to listen to you, but obviously the aging management programs do envision a bounding representative sample, not inspection, not every one. I think this is a continuing dialogue we'll have about, do you do every one, do you do a sample?
And is the receipt inspection every one?
Okay, so the DOT type receipt inspection is,
Well, and the Part 71 licenses give specific direction of how what you have to do to receive a cask. And so the Part 71 rules obviously will apply because it will be shipped under that, in addition to the site rules for taking the smears and 49 type 49 CFR type.
let's be clear, that's inspection of the cask.
Correct, yes.
And then the discussion is then for each canister, what's the level of inspection? Do you do receipt inspection for every single one? You know, our approach or our position now is that we would do a receipt inspection only if there was an issue. And then there's also I represent sample, as you said, so there's a wide spectrum.
So that's the key part there, because, you know, if you did find some issue, was that something that came through transportation, or was that something originally from the site, okay? If you're doing sampling and you don't have one or the other, where one is, you know, there's 100% baselining, you know, I was thinking that you have a baselining either at the site or at the receipt. If you don't have one or the other, then you may not, if something happened, we're not going to be sure where that happened. Well, this is a deal where like you said, we need to talk about the 72, 71, 72, you know, all those pieces, what the inspection, I think probably need to have a separate meeting just on all that.
And just to be open, I mean, as we went through this, the first 72C1 isn't part of this license application. So how we had that discussion is going to have it, but you know, we want to be clear to draw the boundaries.
I agree.
This is Chris Bargus, NRC. You talked about this site being extensively characterized, and so I'm just curious, do you plan to do any additional characterization to support Chapter 2? Or could you just expand on what you plan on to submit for Chapter 2, please?
Scott Carter. We might have to do some additional sampling. We know the location that we are anticipating we're going to place this facility, but we haven't finished our site selection process yet. We do put it in areas where it requires additional sampling. We'll be, but decided I think for a low-level facility, we took about over 600 borings. It's been extensively characterized.
Goodbye.
Yeah, just for point of reference, I guess we've got over 600 borings. We have over 400 monitoring wells that get sampled if there's water available. We have air monitoring stations, I think 27 on site. We've been taking radiological background information for well over a decade. So lots of characterization has gone into the entire site, not just the focal point for our low-level facilities.
I think, and also, for instance, the earthquake requirements for the seismic evaluation, they have extended the seismic evaluation to include the 10,000 return period earthquake. So that's an example of where additional work was done. There wasn't any sampling, but there was additional work was done to calculate that earthquake so that we can compare that against the licenses that we're planning to point to. Okay.
This is Andy. I just have one comment on your last slide, the layout of your SAR. And in section 9, you said the radiation protection. If you look at our SRP, this is the review plan, actually, we have separate part on that. So one is called shielding calculation analysis. The other one's the radiation protection. The radiation protection actually including both part of the operational and also the estimated dose rate. So you put them two together, and then you get the radiation protection. So be mindful on this one when you prepare for SAR. Also, the other comments I had is you may want to think about the delineation of Part 71 to Part 72. When they cut off time or the operation, you would consider then the Part 72 after you unload the cask to the point you put onto the pad or before, that thing I think probably needs some consideration in your application. Otherwise, this would be a question, I think.
Just to clarify, you suggesting we redefine it specifically in the application just to avoid any...
I think that information would be helpful.
Understood.
Yes, I got a question. Phil Brockman, NRC Division of Security Policy. You mentioned one time that you were going to have pads within the security zone, and then you've also, in the last couple of minutes, talked about the transfer of the receiving siding and a receiving building. Are you going to look to have a single protected area? Or put differently, is the receiving siding and this building where you're going to be doing the transfer is going to be within a protected area, either its own standalone protected area or...
Yeah, we're working through that. As far as our next pre-application meeting, I know we want to come in and share the details about our physical security plan.
That's fine. And I'm assuming that the layout will be in the SAR in terms of where the protected area is and the buildings. So that's going to be another separate meeting then.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
David Jim again. You just talked about the site characteristics, earthquake motion, design basis earthquake. I presume that will be the subject you're going to bring out and define what kind of earthquake ground motion at the control station or control phase view motion for that to start with. Now, recognize that I would say advanced new home does have a different approach to analyze the seismic stability of these horizontal storage modules as opposed to, I don't know whether 1004 was done differently or next system, I know that it's different. The point is you need to analyze, control, you've got to establish the analyzed configuration and make sure that, this is an earthquake challenge at the site and at the pad, and what kind of allowed the earthquake motion as a result of the design basis earthquakes. And we have seen some of these provisions written in the text specs as to describing the process to analyze the consequence of earthquake motion if there's an exceedance of earthquake motion. So I just want to make sure that when you have these together, Matt and Riva TN, the methodologies are pretty clearly defined, so there's a way to track it, because we've already seen some disparities there. So just make sure that will be considered.
So I guess our plan right now is to stick with, to have diverse methods in this application, because our intention is not to redo the seismic analysis for an AHSM, a VCC, or our other HSMs. Our intention is to demonstrate that for the earthquakes at this site and the ground motions that they're going to see, that it's bounded by the existing analysis, whatever method that was used to do that. We're not looking to make everything consistent. We're looking to point to the original licensing basis.
Okay, just the point is, again, is the analyze the configuration. We are not going to leave since in the text spec to say that if there's exceedance, that we will have to do a site evaluation, reconciliation, that kind of analysis. So it's a straightforward.
That's what I call that 212 evaluation. That information will be in that 212 type evaluation. Yeah, we don't intend to put earthquake limits in the text specs because we know the site. So the site will be characterized, and those are the limits.
Good. Thank you.
Mike Call, NRC. Just a few comments, and probably just because it hasn't been brought up, I figured I'd point out, but maybe relatively obvious. You mentioned particularly with looking at how you're structuring your SAR to look at erase 1567, sorry. I'd also encourage you to take a look at the interim staff guidance. Those are ideally supposed to be periodically wrapped into the SRP. However, those haven't been, and I think some of that would be useful. May influence how you structure your SAR. Also may influence some of the evaluations and analyses that you do. I'd also like to point out, just in terms of dose limits for 72104 requirements, those limits apply not just to casks that are on the pad. So in looking at doing an evaluation to demonstrate you meet 72104, be sure to include everything that's within the scope of that requirement. I understand that the dose rates that you're using for the canisters are going to be based off of the analyses that are for the transportation packages or for the storage casks, and those can be considered bounding. But if there are any other kinds of things that fall within the scope of 104, whether effluents, where maybe I'm understanding that these canisters probably are anticipated to not have any, then there's that play in too, because 104 is direct dose as well as effluent. Looking at GTCC storage, this being a specific license versus most of what you presented are for certificates, noting that we don't certify GTCC cats for storage. I'm guessing that a lot of that information may come out of your transportation certificates, but I would encourage you to look at other specific license applications that have had GTCC, because I anticipate we would look for the same kind of level of information regarding that storage there.
We're using 2510 as our guidance tab. Okay. Because there's a GTCC canister that's part of that license, so we're using that guidance.
All right, and then ISG 17 also touches on a similar kind of thing. And then just also looking at, it's a Part 72 application, but being a licensee also wrapping in particularly things like radiation protection evaluations, how Part 20 applies, because being a licensee, that you are within the scope of Part 20. And that's probably obvious, and that's probably being considered in everything that's being done, but just to state the obvious, I guess. And I think that might be interesting at the point, because there is a little bit of requirements with regard to the 3 receipt inspections in paragraph 1906. So if that plays into any of the discussion with receipt inspections that happened earlier, then that might be useful. And that's all I've got.
Any other NRC folks?
Yes, can I ask just a follow-up question based on what I heard from the safety related to environmental? Is that okay? Just a comment. So I know that you all mentioned not on. Okay, thank you. So I know that you all mentioned the NUREX that you were looking at, NUREX 1748. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things from there. In addition to the proposed action and purpose and need and alternatives and environmental impacts, the NUREC also discusses mitigation measures and environmental monitoring and measurements, and then the cost-benefit analysis. So I know that we might not have, or you might not have all mentioned those areas in your discussion, but I did want to, bring them up to everyone's attention.
But we obviously will address those aspects. They are in NUREC 1748.
Right.
They'll be included in the environmental report.
I just pointed back to that. And then I just had a follow-up question related to the scope of the cumulative impacts. Now that I've heard a little bit more about, from what your safety application might look like and what it would cover. So can you just clarify one more time for me again what the scope of the cumulative impact would be, whether it would cover the face, all the phases, or whether it will cover just, or your action would cover just phase 1 and 2, and the rest would be in the cumulative impact, or all will be in the...
It'll all be rolled up, and then it'll be captured again in the cumulative impact. Okay. So that's correct.
Okay, and then direct, indirect, and in the cumulative impact.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And from the, standpoint of your schedule, of course, from construction and operation of all those different types of activities that you have planned as well.
And the ones that are ongoing on at present.
Okay, right. In addition to everything else that's ongoing at the facility, or that would occur that might not be related to WCF?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Christina Beck at the NRC. I had a question about slide 17, the bounding analysis, or the 212 as you're calling it. Is this where you'll be looking at the approved AMPs and whether they do consider any degradation mechanisms for the environmental conditions at WCS? Is this where you'll be looking at that and kind of bounding analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick one. Also on page 20, slide 20, contingency plan for the damaged failed canisters. The recovery plan, will that be part of the application?
No, depending on the specific conditions that we were dealing with, because this is a non-mechanistic event. So if something were to happen, then what we would do is evaluate that, and what would give us the time to do that would be putting the canister into a transportation overpack to provide the confinement under Part 72 until we could sort out, and then we would be coming in for license. We would have to come in for licensing actions if we couldn't do it under 7248. There was work, so if we were going to do an in-situ repair, depending on what that would involve, we may have to come in for a licensing action.
And so relying on the transfer cask as almost a secondary confinement if needed.
Not the transfer cask. I heard the transportation cask.
Transportation cask.
Because that's the key piece.
For new homes, it would be the same cask, but yeah, it's the one that provides the primary containment under Part 71. Confinement under Part 71.
On the Part 71 transportation COC for that. To take almost credit.
Of sorts. We'd be relying on the Part 72 application, but yeah, it would be that confined under Part 72. Correct.
And kind of a general question, I may have missed it in the beginning, the actual facility description for WCS, I guess that didn't really jump out at me. So, I mean, there's the pads, you're going to have a handling facility, potential facility where you might be able to do repairs. Has that been decided yet, or is that the actual facility description and what the facility will entail? Is that still in the works?
The actual layout, we've talked about having that, perhaps the next thing, the physical drawing, but it'll be the pad, transfer facility, and then, the rail receipt. But I think the next meeting, we'd like to show you the drawings and layout of that and what the paths would be.
There'll be admin buildings, security buildings, washdown areas, etc. And I've drafted Chapter 1 that just has a high-level description of all those. Incidentally, tomorrow we have a meeting to go over that and to finalize the layout.
Got one final question. The receipt inspections, the Part 71 receipt inspections, so would the actual inspection criteria be part of the operating procedures in the application? And the thought of if there is an unexpected condition through the inspection, is that going to be part of the operating procedures?
Well, I think this goes back to the point of making a clear delineation between Part 71 and Part 72. Because some of this is Part 71 work, and then there'll be the Part 72 work, and so we need to make that delineation. We don't expect to repeat what's in the transportation SARs. However, if we're doing the site dose if we're doing the occupational exposures, obviously we're going to have to look for what the transportation SAR requires to do the appropriate occupational exposures. So I think as we recognize it's a bit of a gray area, and we're going to have to try to define that and then negotiate where that line is.
It seems like in general, as soon as you latch on to that transportation package, it becomes under Part 72. If we could think of it that way. I started thinking of the site
site boundary, because that doesn't make sense, because it's still in transport mode, as long as it's moving when it sits, and you latch onto it to take it off the rail car. Bernie has some ideas?
Well, once it's accepted at the facility, it's no longer in transportation. Part 71 off-site doesn't apply, but your operating procedures still do for unloading the package and removing the canister. So, you know, it's kind of a gray area, but not exactly, because your Part 72 procedures should be consistent with your parts, with whatever transportation package you're using.
Is there a time limit in that acceptance? So many days after it's arrived on site?
Off the top of my head, I would say only if there's a time limit in the transportation certificate. And I know we look at things like, in transportation, we look at things like M&OP for up to a year, but I don't know whether that limits the transportation to a year. There are some packages that we have limited, you know, the transportation time, you know, for hydrogen gas generation, things like that. I don't know whether the 4 or 5 that you guys have specified is one of those. I'm not familiar with all of them. I don't think there would be, but because typically they're only ones that have some sort of hydrogenous material in there, like a food pack, things like that. So I don't know if there's an actual limit there.
Let's think about that as we go forward, because I think it is important to have a time specified.